And welcome back everyone, it's time to talk about early access and why I think it is basically the modern cancer of the games industry. Now, to me this used to be the free-to-play monetization methods that plague the industry. The silly DLC costs with everything added on, the season passes, and of course those tiny little microtransactions in near everything you buy these days. But now, I've kind of changed my thoughts. While free-to-play and monetization madness remains an issue in the gaming industry, an assault on the senses that does activate a certain gag reflex there, that does differ between people, depending on how dull their senses are, from a simple dripping from the mouth to a large pool of vomit from the particularly heinous elements. But early access is different though. It's just like the analogy suggests, a slow death that saps the lifeblood from a game, and I've seen it time and time again. An early access game that is released, but a husk of what it could be and is planned to be. A tide of hopeful supporters that are drawn in by the mere mention of such potential, and then of course the subsequent fall as gameplay flaws and the overwhelming issues poison that original hope. The population dwindles, thoughts on the community turn more negative, and the game overwhelmingly begins to flounder, partly due to these failed expectations built on an unfinished product, but also because such things were never possible to begin with. Then of course when it's time to release, it is buried under the disease that is released upon itself. Of course, multiplayer games seem particularly susceptible to the effects of the early access ailment. There are many smaller indie games I backed earlier in the development that aim for a cooperative or competitive online play, and while some provide a worthwhile experience, many do not. In part, it's a problem of selling an unfinished product that, in this time, you only get a small percentage of what could be in terms of players. This leads to a suboptimal experience of poor games, long wait times, and unbalanced matchmaking. I think this was part of the reason why, let's say, Gigantic and Fractured Space failed to really grab me as much. Waiting so long for a match is annoying enough, but then to deal with the unpolished nature of these early access experience developed a negative idea of them that stuck from then on. There are other smaller indie games like Secret Ponchos and Chaos Reborn that possibly could have been bigger, yet crashed and burned while in the early access, and forgotten once the actual release happened, and many more similar experiences that I'm forgetting. It's just that the problem with this early access model is that you fracture that player base from the beginning. People that play it earlier on, people that get a release, and in between, you spread out that player base over such a long period of time that you create so many more issues because of that. And then there's other issues that come up because of these population concerns. The long wait times and all that negatively impacts how people are actually able to test these games as well. How much they can test these games. How much they're able to see them. There's no way you can give an informed opinion on balance, on characters, on issues, on bugs, when you're unable to play these games in the first place, or when your experience with them is so negative to start. Hype seems to be a huge part within the gaming industry right now, as with the wealth of games that constantly get released, and even those currently being played, they are all competing for a player's attention. It is incredibly hard for many newer titles to gain the attention and player base they need, and trying for early access only exacerbates that problem. What early access and beta periods in particular do is stretch out that marketing timeline for a game to the point of ridiculousness. They try to constantly bombard the player with information throughout this time, and it's mostly inconsequential. Eventually, you just ignore such information as irrelevant, a psychological principle called filtering, or selective attention, wherein the brain just ignores information that is constant. I often find myself doing this rather often when reading through gaming news sites. You see too much of the same game name over and over, showing off small improvements, updates, and press releases that you barely even notice. You just skip straight past to something more interesting. The long development cycle of many AAA products has probably heightened this too, but mostly it's due to unfinished games constantly asking for attention. Then of course when the big update or eventual release does come, it gets the same treatment. It is missed or just forgotten. It is not impossible to break through this, of course, done through sheer dogged determination or with the backing of an industry behemoth, but for the rest, it's reluctant obscurity most of the time. You can see the opposite is true when a game is released and then given to the community in such a short amount of time. With that marketing cycle being so small, it gives people no time to forget those big release names, and you see a greater result because of that. I remember the big E3 release at 2015 when they announced Fallout 4 that would be released in the same year, 5 months after that event. That was an amazing thing to do, and everyone was so excited to get their hands on that new Fallout game. Now, it's a big title anyway, but I think that shortened marketing cycle greatly increased its sales and attention in the end. And then there is the way this early access cycle removes much of that feeling of mystery around these games. Before the release, we already have a constant stream of gameplay videos and guides available, the reveal of various elements and mechanics, quests and commands, the entirety of the game unraveled before you. And this removes that sense of mystery I so long for in many of these games I play. Multiplayer games once again seem to suffer more from such things as well, as you often can't stay oblivious to such things. The groups and other players you do eventually get to play with have certain expectations that come from that early access cycle and that knowledge about the content beforehand. Even if you can avoid such peer pressure, there is a sly pressure there that seduces you towards these things, tempting you to take a peek at what lays before you, to maybe see what's to come or to solve a puzzle set before you. I see this a lot in MMOs where raids are released before the even public gets to play them, and even though you might want to have the newbie mysterious experience, playing through them first, the people you are playing with often don't want you to do that. They want to power through this content, to get through as quickly as possible, not to wait for the person figuring out these things as they go. And I feel like this corrupts that initial experience for you. The spirit of exploration and of mystery in these new experiences that in turn ends up cheapening that eventual release experience ever so slightly. There is so much wrong with the extended early access process that games are doing now. It is a path that is fraught with issues, and one in which greatly increases the chances of a game failing when launching or beforehand. It weakens the player base and community, makes many immune to information throughout, and generally provides a worse experience that creates negative views of the game that persist well after such things may not be an issue anymore. Unless you are seriously desperate, it's not a great idea, and even if you are, that's probably proof enough you'll fail with it anyway. Well, thanks everyone, and I will see you next time.